Live. I'll give it a moment for Twitch. I expect, as is the course. I forgot the number of service. This looks like it's going. All right. I don't know what day it is, but we spent a lot of time grading exams here for CSE466 fall 2025. And that is the sole thing that we're going to talk about today. So a couple of logistical things, because it's been a while since we've had a class and we've burned a whole week on exams. In case you were unaware, the checkpoint for program exploitation was pushed to be the same as the due date, which is November 2nd. I also keep rambling and claiming there are challenges. You'll see them at some point. You can get exams, you can get challenges. Hopefully you're happier with exams. But that's my my take there. They will be worth 0.5%, not adding them to the belt. I know that was something that people asked. So we finished heap. How did we do on heap as a module? Here's our distribution. This is pretty similar to what we've seen in other modules, right? Module comparison. This is kind of what we would expect across the course. People tend to do well in ROP. Heap does tend to be a bit more foreign concept because now we're dealing with pointers, different data structures is kind of a different thing to reason about. So the kind of dip as far as the bottom of the second quartile there, so the bottom of the blue, is to be expected, but everything is kind of plugging along there. Class overall, so this is what is everyone's rough class grade as of the, again, completion of the first module, completion of the second module, completion of the third, completion of heap. So we do see now that roughly half the class is at about a 90, and I don't believe this includes extra credit, just for clarity. It does not. Okay. So we have the teal and the blue, and about 50% of the class is at 90 or above. Solves over time for the heat module. Looks pretty normal to me. This is my favorite graph, and I don't think we've managed to share this yet. This is individual solve rates, right? So every line is a person. Question? Which one am I? I have no idea. And like that is part of the reason that I don't know that is why I can show this, right? If you see yourself and you're an outlier, well, you know that, I don't, right? But the thing that is interesting here is to see, like, these are people who started late, and we see some people pull it off, right? And they get to make it. And then there's other people who are like, yeah, man, I got this weekend. Oh, right? And then they just kind of checked out after they realized they didn't hit the checkpoint. The checkpoint would have been about halfway through here at 20. And so we see that there were people that started late that just didn't make it. It goes back to that kind of start early, ask questions early, right? And we can at least see it a bit. And almost everyone, though, that starts and takes advantage of that first week, even if they start a couple days in, looks like they do make it to that checkpoint and just plateau. I like this kind of graph, even if it is spaghetti. So, I'm curious. I'm legitimately looking for an answer. How do you think the exam went? Was the exam what we said it would be? Maybe, maybe not. Okay. This is the first exam that we've done here kind of with the pwn.college setup. And that means it's something new for us. It's something new for you, right? So how did it go? Okay. The midterm average is a 76.9%. There were outliers on both sides. We did track the amount of time that everyone took. On average, the average student took 70 minutes. Now, I do think that the exam it was probably a little bit longer than it could have been, which is why we gave a little bit of extra time, because the average may have been 70 minutes, and we do have more than 70 minutes in this class. That also means that 50% of people are not done at the 70-minute mark, right? And so we'll try and address that going forward as far as just the number of questions, the amount of writing that is necessary. One of the comments that I got after the exam was this exam was heap heavy. It might have been, right? I wasn't sure. I didn't specifically think about that, but I looked at it after the fact, and there were 5 questions that were rooted in program security concepts, which was 22 points, which is a little bit less than half the exam. If you recall, like program security was a prerequisite knowledge check kind of model, right? And like we did this because our intention wasn't to make a dastardly hard exam. ROT, there were 2 related questions, and that is if I include the PLT GOT under the concept of ROT, which is where you use it more. It was only worth about 7 points, so you could say it's ROT light. I'd accept that. Reverse engineering is a hard thing to make an exam question on, right? What do? Do I show you a giant block of assembly and say write the C code? Are you the decompiler, right? Like what is a reasonable thing to ask someone to do? So we stuck to, as we kind of said, we were going to like conceptual questions in reverse engineering. So there are 2 questions, 5 points. Heap was a big part of the exam, but that's because there are more interesting conceptual things to ask when it comes to the heap. There's more moving parts. There's conceptual things that we can validate that are unique to the heap and are unique to this course instead of prerequisite material. So we're going to run through all of the questions. I would love to hear what your thought process was when you saw them. We're going to tell you what our like grading criteria were, what we were looking for. It is worth noting before I show the first like what was our criteria we were looking for, that what's the word?
You try to give everyone the benefit of the doubt and going through the exam and grading it. Like we tried to be convenient, but similarly, we're not looking to like punish people on nitpicking details. Like if you wrote what we were looking for and then maybe contradicted yourself later, like we're not going to double jeopardy you. Like basically be trying to be fair while grading the exam to you.
And we'll try and elaborate a bit on what we mean when we say that as we get to the specific things that we were looking for. So the first question was this one, which, believe it or not, was my motivating example of a question that we should ask for an exam. Like I've been saying that this should be an exam question for over a year. What were your thoughts when you saw this question? We saw some of your faces. What were your thoughts?
I thought I was about to do really bad on the test. This was, I think, the question I had the least confidence in answering.
Okay, so this was the question I had the least amount of confidence answering. It set a spooky tone for the exam because it was Q1. Any other feedback on this? Nothing?
How do I need to take this stack? Do I also need to draw the stack of main and this? And also at what point did I break? Did leave it was leave it called?
Okay.
Like when I'm drawing the stack.
Sure. So one of the comments is we say breakpoint here. At the end, this is like somewhat, and I get that, right? It's inconclusive. Has leave ret been executed, right? Or have I not? We could have improved the clarity of this question by putting a explicit return after that, so you would know, right? I acknowledge that. And when we say that we were like giving you the benefit of the doubt, if you stated an assumption, we functioned under that assumption. If you drew your stack growing in a spiral, we said, okay, the stack grows in a spiral. I wasn't looking for a specific shape, right? And if you drew things upside down, it was fine. This is what we were looking for. Are there 2 stack frames, right? This doesn't mean that are there 2 boxes. This means if you wrote locals, what would that be? Saved RIP, saved RVP, canary, locals, and specified. One of these locals are for the locals of print course, and the others were locals of print main. Cool. There's clearly 2 stack frames, right? You have defined 2 stack frames. Just the presence of these 4 values. So if you wrote those 4 words on the piece of paper, you got the points. I don't care if you wrote it in the 4 corners of the page. All right. That was the bar, right? Do these things exist on the piece of paper? Then we had a separate criteria of are these in the correct order? Specifically looking for canary, saved RBP, saved RIP. Why would you know that why could I expect that you would know the order of those three things?
It's always the same.
Okay, it's always the same. And when you do buffer overflows in 365, right? What would you overflow? Right? The canary, saved RBP, RIP. There should be something that you've interacted with enough, not only in this course, but in other materials, to where you understand how a stack train works, you understand how these registers are placed, you're good to go. Again, correct location of two local variables, you don't have to name them, just here's the stuff for main, here's the stuff for whatever. If you named them, great. Wasn't necessary. And then the correct location, because the question also asks that you identify where RSP is. And the reason that we asked you to identify RSP was to help us reason about what is the top of the stack, what is the bottom of the stack. Right? If you put RSP in the wrong location and we had to interpret the stack a different way, we would score it in whatever resulted in the greatest amount of points for you as an individual. Right? So we didn't just say, okay, we assume RSP and interpret from there. And if there was at any point we were unsure of how to interpret, we talked with each other. So we definitely tried to give everyone the benefit of the doubt and score in the best way that we can. All right, question 2, what are calling conventions and why are calling conventions important? Anyone want to take a stab at it? What are calling conventions? What do they do? You wrote it, you filled it out on the exam. Come on, guys.
They define
The call convention, they pay which register or which respective or function calls.
Okay, so one of the things calling conventions do is they define the argument order when we call a function. RDI, RSI, RDX, or CX, R8, R9. Right? How do we pass in arguments? So this also applies to syscalls. I don't care if you said syscalls are functions, but hey, it determines arguments. What else does calling conventions dictate? Okay, that a value is returned in RAX. It also determines what are caller and called saved registers, right? And so our criteria say something about registers, say something about caller saved registers, say something about it being a standard because we are running on a particular CPU. 3 points, 3 criteria. Question 3. Name a common constraint you may encounter when passing shell code to a binary. What is a strategy an attacker can employ to mitigate or bypass this constraint? Be detailed in your strategy description. Now, a lot of our questions were open-ended. They're open-ended on purpose, right? I don't want this to be you write down the definition of something on your cheat sheet and you write the definition back to me. What we're looking for is conceptual understanding. Name a constraint. And we had actually a number of questions about this question. Name any constraint. Anything you can think of.
non-executing.
Okay, NX. I have an executable stack. I have a limited amount of space to place my shell code.
There's an inability to pass through null bytes.
Inability to pass through null bytes.
There's a canary.
There's a canary in the way. All of these were valid. Okay, so if you said anything that makes, and you can pull from, I think somebody even said, they like describe no H bytes.
Yeah.
Right. I don't know that it's a common constraint, right? But it's a constraint you saw while going through the material. Name something that is a problem when passing input into a challenge and explain how you deal with it, right? Explain how you deal with it. It's going to be different based upon all of those constraints. But as long as you justified your answer to a reasonable degree, you got the points. Yeah. That was what was on our rubric. We had our rubric designed before the exam.
Yeah. And just to be clear, so if you're when you say 2 points for detailed bypass strategy, generally how this would even out is that if you even gave a remote semblance of dodging it, we gave you 1 point. So if your constraint was no null bytes and your answer was don't use null bytes, you probably got points then, but you didn't get 2 points because you didn't explain how to avoid a null byte. Like if you gave us anything further than that, for example, using XOR or not using like smaller register sizes to avoid null and constant. Like any further than that, that's how you got that 2nd point.
If there are any questions about any of this, I'd rather we sort it out now, unless it's like your specific exam. Question 4. How does PIE work? How does ASLR work? How do PIE and how are PIE and ASLR enabled? How do PIE and ASLR work together to make exploitation more difficult? What strategies can an attacker employ to mitigate or bypass these mechanisms? Now, there's a lot of questions there, and there's a lot to unpack. The question was worded in such a way that how do these work together was like, hopefully they do slightly different things. That I feel like there's some confusion on PIE and ASLR. What we were looking for, PIE is a compilation setting of the binary. This is something that you determine when you build the binary. You pass 2 lines, you don't need to know these literal lines, but it's -PIE -FPIE to GCC. One of those goes to the compiler, the other goes to the linker, but you will build a binary that is PIE. This is why you can run checksec against an executable, and it will say PIE, no PIE. This is a property of the binary itself. PIE does not randomize the binary. PIE enables a binary to be randomized. There is a difference. A PIE binary can be randomized. A non-PIE binary cannot be randomized. The thing that does the actual randomizing is ASLR. ASLR is a runtime kernel setting. You didn't need to say kernel. You didn't need to specify. You did kind of need to say like runtime. You need to express that ASLR is what happens when I'm running the binary, right? And you need to express that ASLR is the thing doing the randomizing. A mitigation, anything that you have done in the modules or challenges, brute forcing a nibble, getting a leak and calculating something, doing the partial overwrite, and anything that was somewhat reasonable, we would accept. Right? It would be incorrect to say that PIE randomizes the binary and ASLR randomizes the stack and the heap in these other regions of memory. That would be an incorrect statement because PIE itself does not randomize anything. PIE enables the binary to be random. And this was something that tripped up a lot of people, and it trips up a lot of people.
And this is like one of those questions where we were looking for like the conceptual understanding of what these do, not just verbatim dictionary definition of what PIE stands for. Like you'll notice it. So for example, if someone wrote down PIE, it stands for position independent executable and put a period, they got 0 points.
Oh, they definitely didn't get the PIE points for it.
Yeah. Well, yeah, 0 for that criteria.
Right. I wasn't looking for specific keywords. I wasn't looking, it was, can you convey something that touches on these points? Okay. Question 5. Describe the role of PLT and GOT. Why do they exist? Describe the specific role of the PLT. Describe the specific role of the GOT. How does full railroad impact the PLT and GOT entries? We had a brand new video specifically on this. What we were looking for, the PLT contains executable code. This is why you call it puts at PLT. That is where assembly instructions that are executed are located. You could have said stubs, you could have said it's executable, right? The PLT calls into the GOT. The GOT contains a table of function pointers. You didn't need to say that they point to the loader, they actually don't. Some people did, we didn't take the points if that's what you said. But if you understand that the GOT is a table of function pointers that you're gonna like, that's where I'm jumping to, those are my jump targets. Great, you got the point for what is the GOT. It's a table of function pointers. Collectively, the two of these exist to enable dynamic function resolution in libraries to be called into. So you had to understand that the PLT does not contain the function or does not contain the pointers. It is just little executable assembly instructions. The PLT uses the GOT's pointers to direct where it's going. As far as full railroad does 2 things. If we were to like boil it down, the first thing it does is it resolves these pointers before main is called, right? At initialization, I don't care if you said it specifically at main, but it resolves the pointers early, right, before execution begins. And the second thing that it does is it makes it so that the GOT is read-only. It does not make the PLT read-only. The PLT is going to be executable. It's executable instructions. It's read-only by anyways. this will be the last question I'm going to talk about. Question 6, given the following VM map output, and we just built like some simple binary and ran VM map and showed you what's going on here, right? We have a target memory address, which we define as EA3AFD. This is our target address. What region of memory is the target address located in? Can anyone tell me how they would find that? It's not a trick question. You're making faces. What do we got?
You look at the system, find out.
Okay, so the statement was we can look at the start of this mapped line and the end of this mapped line, and we can say our target address is between the start and end of one of these lines. This is 6EA3F. You'll notice that the three most least significant nibbles are zeroed out here. So when I have 6EA3, that falls right here. Our question is, what region of memory is this located in? And we provide an example of what we mean when we say region of memory, such as the stack, the heap, the main binary, libc. Where would you say this is located? In the main binary. We can look over here. It says it's in bin some program. This is our main binary. If you said some program, that was fine as well. Given the target memory address only, can we know the location of the stack? Why or why not? What we're asking here is if you are given this memory address and only this memory address, can I calculate a stack address?
No.
Okay, someone says no. Anyone think they can? Okay. Why is the answer no?
With ASLR, the regions of E, stack, and libc, but more importantly for this question, the stack, they're all randomized, and there's no correlation between the stack page address and the main binary page addresses, or any addresses for that matter.
Okay. I'm going to restate that, and then I'm going to be mean. So the statement was, because of ASLR, all of these addresses are randomized, which we can see that ASLR is enabled here. And because we can see that there's this like randomized randomized bytes midway through the address. Because of ASLR, the address is randomized. And you said a second thing, which is these are distinct regions of memory that are mapped differently. Okay? When I say that we gave you the benefit of the doubt, that's a great response to how we gave you the benefit of the doubt. All right? The answer to the first question is the main binary. The answer to the second question is no, because they are separately mapped regions. It is not specifically because of ASLR. So if you said something like, the addresses are random, ASLR randomizes the addresses, we can't calculate a distance because they are separately mapped regions, which is what I heard. You were correct in the nugget that they are separately mapped regions and they're not contiguous. I can't find a constant from somewhere up here to somewhere down here. But that is not specifically because of ASLR. So, I have, this is actually the Q1 program, except I defined get instructor. Not super important here, but what I'm going to do is we will, what do I want to do? Let's build this, and if we can't build.sh, we see that I'm building this with PIE. So we'll build.sh. I've now got my a.out. We'll run our a.out, and let's just prove it actually. Check sec a.out. It has PIE. We run it. Oops. We will sudo gdb a pgrep a.out. Why did that not work?
No, on.
Aha. All right. This is ASLR enabled on this?
Yeah.
Yes. Why do you say that?
It's got that random light.
That's right. It's got the randomized text values in the middle here. Right. ASLR does randomize the base address that a region of memory. When I say region of memory, I mean like the binary here. Is loaded into. So it's going to randomize this, and then everything is contiguous from here down to a certain point. I think 3A is going to be the end of, it should be 6. Should be the end of the binary here, A dot out. And then the heap has a different randomized thing because it's at a different base address. And so we would say that the main binary is a distinct region. We would say the heap is a distinct region. We would say libc is a distinct region. I believe that the loader here is contiguous with I'm just looking at end start, making sure that they all line up. The loader is contiguous with libc. If I'm looking at this correctly, we'll find that the stack is not contiguous, right? 184, 487. The end of this is not the start of that. These are not right next to each other in memory. So we would say the stack is a separate region of memory as well, right? This is with ASLR. I'm going to perform some voodoo. Say set arch R. I had to look this up. This will run it without ASLR. Is the binary still PIE?
Yes.
Why?
It's compiled. Okay.
Yes. PIE is a property of the binary. It was compiled with PIE. It is a position independent executable. When I attach to this, and I do the same thing on VM map.
It's gonna look different.
It's gonna look different. I think that's safe, right? But is the binary going to be located in a random location? No, because I'm running a PIE binary without ASLR. This is a PIE binary. It is located at a fixed known address because ASLR is not randomizing it. If I were to run this again, set arch R on this, I would get the exact same address for the binary. The binary is PIE. The binary can be randomized. But what does the randomizing? ASLR at runtime when I launch the process. This distinction is very important. Now we're looking at something where ASLR is disabled. Are there distinct memory regions? Or is everything just right next to each other?
Still distinct memory.
There are still distinct memory regions. So ASLR is not what gives us distinct memory regions. This is just a property of loading the binary. There is still a distinct memory region that is the binary. There is still a distinct memory region that is the heap. There is still a distinct memory region that is libc and its contiguous values. There is still a distinct memory region that is the stack. Yes.
How does the base get decided if ASLR is disabled? Because Pi would have offsets in memory for each instruction and so on.
That is a great question. The question is, if Pi is disabled, how is this memory address determined?
ASLR was disabled.
Right. Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you. Thank you. All right. So this is PIE, but ASLR is disabled. So how does this 555 get determined? I want to say that's just a de facto standard. I think you can rebase. I don't remember how.
GDB we can set the base, but what if it's not in GDB?
This is not in GDB.
Oh,
If we look at what I did, I attached.
okay.
And so this was just running the binary on its own and attaching to it. So at runtime, if ASLR is disabled, but it is PIE, then we end up with this. This will be consistent. There is no randomization in these little bytes. It is not ASLR that is distinctly mapping these regions. What ASLR does is it randomizes these hexadecimal values. If you mentioned ASLR, but said they are distinctly different mapped regions of memory, we gave you the point. If you just said ASLR, because of ASLR, we did not. Yes.
If ASLR is disabled for this binary, will the addresses of linked libraries, heap and stack remain the same across every single execution?
Let's find out. So we have that one up.
I'm pretty sure we do.
I want to say it's deterministic, but I'm just like, there's no better. I'd rather just see it.
I like to guess and then find out for sure.
I need to know. Can I get PID? Yes. 2378 PSUX grep a.out. It's going to be 2531. All right, I got libc at DD5. I have libc at DD5. But getting a leak in here does not inform me about something in another region, right? And so ASLR is certainly a factor, but we cannot leverage a leak in a binary to reason about, for instance, libc. We cannot leverage like from direct map, right? Because they are different mapped regions of memory. They are not contiguous. The numbers don't just increment, they aren't right next to each other. Questions about that? Cool. Second half. We still have the same target memory address. Given only the target memory address, how can we find the base address of the region? When we said region, we used the word up here, right? Region of memory. And we provided some examples of what a region is: the stack, the heap, the main binary, etc. How can we find the base address of the binary from a leak? Yep. What do we got?
I said look at like GDB or disassembler and find how far you are, like the offset, and then subtract it back down.
Cool. So we could use GDB, find out what the offset from our leak is to this base address, because everything in here in the main binary, these addresses are all contiguous, which means from this leak, I can know where anything else in the main binary is located. One way that is helpful to do that is find the base address, which is going to be a constant distance from A2000 in this case to A3 AFP. Right? And so we find this constant offset, and then we do some subtraction. Based on the above memory mapping, identify a region that is a valid location to place shellcode. Where and why? No, somebody else. Somebody else hit me. Where and why? Where and why on this, please?
Mostly anywhere with an executable section, so an X on the like on the permissions spot. So I wrote like a memory address range that had a executable permission set.
So what else do you need to get shellcode there?
Yeah.
What enables you to put input somewhere? Right permission.
Writable permission. Right. So what we needed was I could place shellcode right here. This is a read-write area of libc, right? However, shellcode would be functionally useless here because I can't execute. We have a readable executable region. If shellcode was here, I could execute it, but it's not writable, so I can't get it there, right? And so the only region of memory that is a valid location to place shellcode, if we plan on executing the shellcode, is a read-write executable region of memory, which there is only one region in the output. It's going to be different between A and B, sort of what region, if I remember right. But there is only one region that is read-writable executable. If you identified that, if you circled it, if you said the read-writable execution, if you drew an arrow to it, it's all good. What we were looking for was somehow indicating anything in this range. If you happen to say because it's read-write executable, that was a bonus as well.
All right, before we move on, based on this VM map output, how do I know if NX is enabled or not?
Stack does not have an executable.
Bingo. So that's one thing, like we got a couple responses that, for example, like you can put it on the stack and use NX, but reading the output, it's very obvious that NX is disabled. Like for any,
NX is enabled, the stack is not executable.
it's stack is not
So if you said the stack, and I understand why someone might say that, 'cause we had a lot of challenges where they read in shellcode onto the stack and we just executed it. Or you read shellcode into the stack and you overwrote saved rip and jumped to that shellcode, right? You saw that happen, right? However, conceptually, there's only one valid place where we could place shellcode, and it is wherever is read, write, execute. All right. If you're good, I'm going to hand off to Michael here to take the back half.
Bingo.
Thank you.
Okay, so question 7 we asked on the exam. This is one of our reverse engineering questions. Essentially, what is the difference between static and dynamic analysis? This was a pretty simple question to answer. Pretty much what we were looking for was a definition of static analysis and a definition of dynamic analysis. What is the key difference between these? Anyone?
One happens during runtime, one happens not.
Bingo. Like that's basically what we were looking for, which was static analysis does not run the program. Dynamic analysis does run the program. So you get an interactive view. Like these have different use cases. Just important to remember, keep in mind like what the differences of these are, because they're both very useful for different things. So pretty cut and dry question. Basically, if you mentioned either of these, you got the points. Question 8. This was one of our heap questions where basically we asked you to draw a free Tcache chunk with all the relevant metadata fields labeled. And so essentially we were looking for a couple key points here. Does anyone want to take a stab at all of the elements that we were looking for before I throw it up on the screen?
You draw it
I can draw it,
on the whiteboard.
but I want them to tell me how to draw it.
Okay, I just want a picture.
Okay. Robert wants a picture, so we're gonna get a picture. That's not whatever this square root nonsense is. We don't like math. All right. I've got a box. What goes in my box for a freed heap chunk in the Tcache? Previous size? Chunk size. Okay. Now, where does that go?
Before the start of the actual
Mhm. So I'm going to draw this. Let's go up and down. Side to side is not right. So we're going to go OX8. Know that there is a negative in front of this. Oop, that's not right. See, I almost did it wrong. Size. What else are we missing? Next pointer I heard somewhere. Bingo. So we also need a next. What else am I looking for? Key. And this would be our OXO and plus OX8. So, fun fact, there's actually no prev size in a freed Tcache chunk. Question.
Did I lose points for put brief size on there?
No, you did not lose points for putting prev size on there. We are aware that Jan claims that this exists in some of his slide decks. It's not true. So the 4 points that we were looking for was our size, our next, our Tcache key, and then we asked you what address gets returned when you actually allocate this chunk. Like when we reuse it, because with the implication that it's currently free, it's currently in the Tcache. What do I get back when I malloc? Yeah, +0. So I'm going to get basically the address of where this next pointer lives, because the immediate 8 bytes above that is where those size and some of that heap metadata lives. Question.
Even if chunk is free, but the previous size it would still be there because it's still in memory and it hasn't been overwritten by anything else. Neither does the Tcache modify that value.
Like so technically yes, but it's not used.
Yeah, it's not used, but technically it's just there. I mean, and it's part of
And it's not part of the T cache, like in this case.
Okay, yeah.
Like it's essentially unused. Okay, so our next question that we asked was our second reverse engineering question of the exam. Essentially, what is the difference between disassembly and decompilation? And then we asked you, when might you want to use one of them over the other? In this case, we said disassembly instead of decompilation, but realistically, we were just looking for the difference between the two. So first off, who knows what the difference between disassembly and decompilation is? Hopefully that's something that we've all should have experienced by now. Anyone?
Disassembly is the architecture specific instructions,
Mhm.
while decompilation is pseudo-seq or whatever code it was.
Yeah. So essentially, disassembly is what happens when you take those raw bytes in your ELF and translate them back into machine code. Like essentially, what does the assembly instruction look like that we are actively executing from that data? Similarly, decompilation is the process of taking those machine instructions, that assembly language, and trying to lift it back into a C representation. That process is complicated. You don't need to know how it works. You just need to know that that is what happens. It's a best effort reconstruction. And so this means that there are cases where we definitely want to use disassembly over decompilation. There are cases where the decompilation sometimes isn't 100% accurate, or cases where just underlying details get muddled and lost, especially like if you're someone like me and you hide all the casts in IDA so you don't get to see all the little data type casts everywhere. And so you can run into situations where maybe we're moving 1 byte, IDA thinks you're moving 2 bytes, and so you get some weird mismatches going on every once in a while. So sometimes, especially when you're dealing with like bitmap, looking at the disassembly can be very, very useful. So the 3 criteria that we're looking for was a reasonable definition of decompilation, a reasonable definition of disassembly, and then just some idea that decompilation isn't necessarily perfect and that disassembly is what we kind of use when we need that precise level of detail. Like when you're going through GDB, you're stepping through your instructions, you're reading the assembly code, you're not trying to like map it to pseudo C in your head. Because obviously, like for one line of C, there could be like 5 or 6 assembly instructions that execute. So next question for question 10 is, what is shellcode? What is a ROP chain? And how does a ROP chain differ in execution from shellcode? So this is essentially a question to like quiz you guys on conceptual understanding of ROP. Like how does ROP work at a conceptual level? Not just how do I use a gadget? And so what we were looking for essentially was just applicable definitions of what shellcode is and what a ROP chain is. I hope all of you know that by now. And then finally, we asked about how ROP chains differ in execution. Like, how does that execution loop work? Like, when you insert shellcode into a program, it's going to execute instruction after instruction and just keep going, right? So how does that work for a ROP chain? Does anyone want to take a stab at just like a rough explanation of this?
Sure. A ROP chain is just like, it's like a couple assembly instructions followed by a return. So like one could be like pop and then whatever register you want followed by a return. And then I would follow that up by the value that I want to be popped in. And then that just allows me to chain together these like little bits of assembly instructions that are already within the binary. I didn't put them in there. They're already there.
Yeah. And so the big thing that we were looking for was that mechanism that causes that cycle to happen, which is the return instruction. Essentially, you have a chain of these things that we are calling gadgets as fun hackers that are basically sequences of assembly instructions that end in that return instruction. Note that gadgets do not strictly have to end with a return instruction. There's other mechanisms to do it, but just RET is the most common one and by far like why it's called return-oriented programming. The idea is that you can have a sequence of these gadgets and return will cause the next one to be popped off the stack and executed for you. Because let's remember back to our ROP lectures, what does the RET instruction literally mean? Anyone? Pop RIP, that is exactly correct. Like anytime you execute a RET instruction, that is effectively what is happening. And so for this, essentially we were looking for a definition of shellcode. It's assembly instructions that you inject into the program and execute. Then a ROP chain is basically a sequence of gadgets. And here we define gadgets as just addresses to existing functionality in the program. Like you don't even have to say the word gadgets if you could just remotely identify what was going on here. And then finally, we were looking for basically the difference in execution mechanisms. So really what we were looking for about grading was just, did you mention that ROP chains or ROP is basically enabled by this RET loop that happens? And so basically if you broach that concept, we gave you the point. Okay. Next question is the safe linking question. So safe linking is a very interesting concept, one that you guys got introduced to fairly recently, but we felt it was still fair to ask on the exam just because we put it on the study guide. So first thing we asked was just, what is safe linking attempt to protect against? Essentially the why does safe linking exist question. And then finally, we asked you to describe how the protect pointer macro protects values. And then we asked you to describe the formula. So first off, does anyone know the protect pointer macro off the top of their head?
It's protect position, comma PTR and return position shifted when XOR PTR.
Exactly. So for those unfamiliar, I'll draw it out. Why not? Why not? Why not? Why not? And note that when we were grading this, we were not looking for like you to have the exact function definition of what the protect pointer macro was. Like if you wrote like some rough approximation or described the behavior of the protect pointer function, you also got the points. Essentially, like I'll go over the criteria very soon, but what? That's not how that works. There we go. Basically, protect pointer. It takes in those two arguments, as you mentioned, pause and pointer. You want to keep going?
Return positions shifted by 12.
Correct. So essentially, this is what we were looking for, but the way the points shook out is we first wanted you to define why safe linking exists, which is that it protects against metadata corruption in the heap. That is basically why it exists. It prevents you from leaking the next pointer, prevents you from overwriting the next pointer. In theory, obviously, like we talked about, like the limitations and why you can bypass this. Lots of interesting implications, but essentially you got 1 point for identifying the position and pointer were part of this. You got 1 point for the bit shift, so you had to have it, and it also had to be correct. And finally, you got 1 point for basically mentioning that these are XORed together. And those are how those 3 points shook out for the protect pointer macro. Does anyone have any questions on this before I move on? Cool. All right, so our last question was a little bit of a doozy. This one was basically, do you understand how the T-cache works? And so essentially, we asked you to draw what the T-cache looks like after this is completed execution. And then we explicitly set it up so that one of these chunks would be reused at the end. And then we asked you, okay, which chunk effectively got reused? So involved question, worth a lot of points. Let's go through it. So our grading criteria for this was 2 points each. Was, did you have the T-cache birthright struct present? And did you have the count variables there and correct? You basically got 1 point for the T-cache birthright struct being anywhere on your page. And then you got another point for the counts being present and correct. Then you got 2 points for the chunks being in the correct bins. Since we had 2 bins, that's kind of how we did the points. So if you got chunks right in one bin, but not in the other bin, you got 1 point for this. You got both, you got both. Similarly, for the correct ordering, chunks are in the correct order. Like if you got both of them right, you got 2 points. If you got one right, you got 1 point. And then finally, this last question, which indices in the pointers array contain the same addresses? We just essentially, like if you were correct, you got 2 points. If you weren't, you got 0. So pretty simple. And so I wanted to go through this really quick, mostly because diagrams are really fun and cool. And so let's go through what this actually looks like, just to really reinforce this really quickly. So first off, I have my T-cache birthright struct. Note that I have sizes up there, but we're not worried about like what the size is. Like you didn't have to memorize all the T-cache bin sizes or anything, as long as you could identify that there are 2 different bins that these chunks go into because they are clearly of different sizes. So first thing that happens is lines 2 through 7 is just mallocing chunks in memory. Hopefully we all have seen malloc, and so this part hopefully makes sense. Essentially, we malloc 6 times. I get these 6 chunks back. Note that the sizes correspond to the sizes that we're requesting with malloc. Anyone have any questions about this? Okay, now let's get to where the fun begins, which is when we start freeing things. So remember that these T-cache birthright structs, they are linked lists. And so what happens when I free a chunk is I have basically the head of this list. Note that in the head of this list, it's not like literally pointer 0. It is the address of the chunk. Just using some shorthand to represent this here without the diagram becoming very messy. Just use a what?
Just using slang.
Yeah, just some slang.
Calculated.
And so when we free our first chunk, that chunk is no longer going to be in use. So it's marked by red in my color-coded PowerPoint. And then it's inserted into the Tcache per thread struct list for the bin of that size. Similarly, because we now have one chunk in the bin, that count variable has increased by 1. Then I'm going to go free the second chunk. Now, here's where number one source of error, it automatically introduces. When I free a chunk, where does it go in the list? Does it go to the head of this list or does it go to the tail of this list? Head. Now, one thing to remember is that like this is a linked list. In no universe does it make sense to add to the end of a linked list, especially a singly linked list like this, because the implication is that you only have a head pointer. To get to the very end of the linked list, you have to traverse every single node. And so just thinking about this from an efficiency standpoint, like if I'm adding these, if I was in the world where these T chunks were freed and added to the end of this list, free becomes like an O of n operation instantly. Whereas if I just add to the front of the linked list, it's always an O1 operation, like to once again use some slang, where basically I'm just performing one operation where I just move the head down and then drop my node there. And so it should make sense that this is the way that that works versus the other way where imagine that you had like a Tcache list of like, there's a cap on this reasonably. I think it's like 7 chunks, but say you had like 100 chunks, you would have to iterate through all of them to free a chunk. That's bad. So we don't do it. So we're adding to the head of the list, and then that count variable does get updated. Similarly, when we free 5 or free pointers at 5, we're going to be freeing our first chunk of a different size, so it's going to go into a different bin. These do not go into the same bin because they're different sizes. Continuing on. Now, so we freed 0, then we freed 3, and then we freed 1, all of these size 20 chunks. And so remember, these are going to be added in the correct ordering. Like the head is what's being updated, the rest of it's being pushed down, if you want to think of it like that. Like a literal stack of objects. Next, we're going to free 2, which is going to once again update the head pointer in the bin size for 80. And then we're finally going to free 4, which is going to complete all of our free chunks. And then the last thing that we asked people was, okay, well, now we're going to malloc one more chunk. And when we malloc one more chunk, which chunk out of this list of things that I have freed previously is going to be returned to us? Where do we get it from? Well, we get it from the 20 bin, yeah, and then we're pulling it from the head of the list. So we're going to be pulling that top chunk that is referenced in the head of the Tcache per thread struct. Like we know to look there. That's how we do it. And so that chunk gets reused for pointer 6. And so the last point of this question was simply, could you identify that pointers 4 and pointer 6 now contain the same address because we haven't been zeroing out any of these arrays? Does anyone have questions on that? Okay. So let's talk the fun part. How do we get points back? So what we're going to do is we're going to allow you guys to make corrections to the exam. This goes for everyone who took it. Essentially, you can grab a blank copy of the exam from us. We're just going to post the PDF on Discord. You can print it off and you can handwrite corrections. So let's say that you got question 1 and question 12 wrong because maybe I forgot how to draw diagrams. And you pick up a blank exam, you print it off, you write the correct answers for the questions that you missed. So if you only missed questions 1 and 12, for example, you only do those. And then you can get 50% of the points that you missed back, obviously, if you get the answer correct on your corrected exam. Now, it's got to be handwritten. You got to print it off. None of this like you write it in Photoshop, then print it out, or like you type up your responses in Word, then print it out. It's got to be handwritten. And basically, you have to return your corrected exam by the 13th, and you will give us back your corrected exam and your old exam. Does anyone have any questions about this? Yes.
Can we choose to get our old exam back after the corrections, after grading the corrections?
To be determined.
Why are you doing this?
We're doing this because the goal of the exam is not to beat you over the head with a stick of knowledge. The goal of the exam is to realize, hey, here's where my gaps are. Here's places where I can improve as a student and as a programmer and as a hacker. Like the goal of this class is to not be like to come out at the end of the class being like, God, I feel like an idiot because there's so much to learn. The goal is to understand, hey, here's where all of my knowledge gaps have popped up. And I'm sure over the course of doing this class, like, heck, I know when I took it as a student, I felt the same way, which is that you very quickly realize here's some of the stuff that maybe I didn't know as well as I thought I did. Because when you do these CTF challenges and you do these challenges, like it challenges your assumptions. You have to know how things work at a very detailed level in order to complete these challenges. And so you start to highlight some of those inconsistencies. Yes.
Your corrections are wrong.
If your corrections are wrong, can you resubmit corrections? I would really hope that you wouldn't get the corrections wrong, but yes, in order to get the points back, you do have to be correct, and we're probably not going to do a second wave of corrections.
You can get one.
So yeah, one try. But like, this is not a thing where you have to like grab the exam and then sit in front of us and write it out from memory. No, we're giving you until the 13th of next month. Like, use your resources. Yes.
What were the different questions in the third Tuesday and Thursday batch?
So question is, what were the differences on the exam between Tuesdays and Thursdays? The answer to that is basically the code samples changed.
Oh, no.
So, yes. Well,
You made them, you know.
I know them. I'm saying all the code samples changed. So like, you go way back. So you were given a different code sample for this. You were given a different VM map here. And then you were given a different code sample here. Those were basically the differences. Yes.
For the figure map one, onto the system.
So the question was for the VM map question, but the answer is different. No. We picked the VM map explicitly so that all the answers would be roughly the same.
It's a different region of map.
Yeah.
Like a different address.
It's a different
That's
address.
like conceptually you're doing the same.
But like both of these addresses are just the address of main in whatever binary I happen to pull for the VM map. So it's like they're both in the main binary. The goal was not to make one exam prohibitively more difficult than the other. And so once again, do make sure that you're going and doing these corrections. Like once again, the goal is not for you to get your exam back and go, oh crap, I'm cooked. The goal is for you to say, okay, well, maybe I didn't know this as well as I thought I did, or maybe this is a gap. Like these are all questions that when we sat down to write the exam, we reasonably expected that everyone to be able to like answer these questions. The goal was not to say, oh, they're not going to get that one. We got to ask that question. No, the goal was to say, okay, I think everyone's going to get this answer. So let's put that question on the exam. You want to go?
When will the exam be posted on the grades page?
That's a you question.
I'm not in front of the camera. When will the exam be posted on the grades page?
The exam. It's very tempting to say they're live right now and then watch you panic, but they're not live yet. They will be coming very soon. Robert will post an announcement on Discord when the grades are on pwn.college.
Later today.
Later today. Question.
I love you guys. You guys are so nice.
We try our best.
So question, correct, you just make those late.
Sorry?
The questions that we don't need the points back, we can just leave them down.
Yes. So if you got full credit for like a question, like obviously, like if you got the question about like decompilation versus disassembly right, or like this question, like you don't need to go out and rewrite the correct answer. Like we know you got it right the first time. So this is only for the questions that you missed points on. And so the way this works is, let's say that you on question 10 missed one part. Like maybe you defined shellcode, maybe you defined rot chains, but then you didn't get how they differed in execution. That's where you lost the point. You fill out the correct answer, we'll give you half a point back for that question.
So do I need to fill the correct answer for all of those points or just the ones that I got wrong?
So I would say for all of them, just because it might not be 100% obvious where you missed the point. I don't want you to like have that like weird, like trying to guess of where you lost the point. So just fill it out, put the correct answer there, give it back to us, earn some points back, and hopefully learn something in the process. So let's see. questions from Twitch chat. I don't see any. So there's 9 minutes left in class. So just a couple of other things too. If you have questions about your specific exam, like let's say you've been sitting here this whole class, you're reading it and you go, all right, well, I think I got that right. And I think they're idiots for marking me wrong. That's when you come and talk to us. We're basically going to give you, what was it? What did we decide on, like a week or two? Okay. You have until next Tuesday to bring your exam questions to us. Just shoot us an email, track one of us down, show up to office hours. We'll be happy to discuss these kind of things. And just, yeah, well, like we're human. We probably made a mistake somewhere. So don't be afraid to like come and argue and fight us on it. Just be reasonable. Does anyone else have any questions?
Did you take data on what questions were missed more than others?
Yes.
What was the most missed question?
They want to know what the most missed question was on the exam. Which I know off the top of my head. I'm asking you if I should share this.
Could you just say the question? Sure.
Yeah. Okay. So the most missed question was question 1, which is draw the stack frames. So, yes.
We may talk about the details of question 1 on Thursday.
Yes.
Fact.
Because this is a fundamental computer science concept and was the most missed question on the exam. Therefore, we believe it is very important to make sure that all of you guys have this knowledge. Like, you will all leave the class being stack frame experts. Questions?
No, just not a question. It's like just comment about this question in general.
If you want to.
It felt like it's like obviously it's one of those questions that you cannot specifically study for. It just felt like more of like a fundamental check than anything, which is good, but also I couldn't study for it.
Well, I believe in the study guide we did have something about this. I'm going to sanity check myself right now on that. But the main thing is that this is something where we are hoping by the time that you do like 30 to 40 memory corruption challenges based around overflowing buffers on the stack, doing stack memory corruption, you would have some idea of what these stack frames look like. And so it should make sense that you can go from a local variable down to your return address because you've been doing that the whole time. And so I guess like just as an aside, like it should make sense. Oh, this erase is terrible. That's and like even if the only exposure you've had to stack frames is in GDB, right? Like that's how I learned about stack frames was like just staring at GDB long enough. Like so you have cases, you basically like the intuition that we're trying to reinforce in you is that let's say the stack is growing up in this case. So if this is your current function frame, RSP is going to be up here. So you have your locals. That's a really bad C. Wow. Then you have canary. Then you have saved RDP. And then you have saved RIP. Boom, there's a stack frame. Question.
How does the buffer overflow work in your picture?
Like that. So we have locals. The implication is that as you write into these locals, you continue to write and write and write and write. So eventually you run into your canary. Now, this is the whole reason the canary exists, is to literally prevent this type of memory corruption. Like we put data that we don't want to be corrupted below the canary. So like if you've ever seen times where maybe there's like 2 or 3 memory addresses below the canary instead of just your classic RVP RIP, this is because the compiler decided that it needed to protect that value. And so it put it below the canary. This essentially it's just the dividing line between where your local variables are, aka you can have fun and change things in this land, to the no longer can you safely change things. And so that's the whole reason the canary exists. And this is why stack frames are really important. Like understanding this as a programmer is very useful. You will even have cases where maybe you have an entire second stack frame down here. Like once again with your locals, your like canary, your saved RVP, your saved RIP. And sometimes your buffer overflow has to go all the way down here. Or maybe you have like an arbitrary write that takes you down into a lower stack frame. Like the point is that it's an important concept to reason about. And like this like Stack Overflow as a website literally is named after this kind of thing. And so it's an ephemeral concept in computer science. It's not really going to disappear. Yeah, you're right. You're right. You're right. I've been playing too much Magic together. Question.
For corrections, does something get picked up by online as booklet?
Yeah.
Have those today?
So we're going to post a PDF on Discord. You could print it out. I do have a couple that I like. If you don't have a printer or don't have access to one, I have a handful of them that I could give you, but I don't have enough for everyone. So if you have the ability to print one, that would be appreciated. But if you do not have the ability to print one, come find me. Yes.
If I got just like, can I just print out the page of it?
Yeah, you can just print out the page. Yeah. I don't need the whole. Yeah. Cool. Any other questions before we go ahead and wrap up? I've got a couple more minutes. Yeah, I checked Twitch. The comment is high key. This makes sense.
Loki, you right though.
Do you want to stop this so I don't? I could. I almost tried to tab into your Discord to look at the study guide.
We drops DMs.
Yeah, but if you have questions about your specific exam, you have a week to raise those concerns from the time you get your exam. So if you're a Thursday student, you pick it up on Thursday. Like you talk to us until Thursday. Cool. All right. Later.